Good morning, and let's do a couple of things on this project that might be under the category of finishing or kind of polishing off the last couple of things that a person would do if they were going to publish their video to a wider market. The two things we're going to really look at are tidying up the audio with a technique called checkerboarding and doing just a little bit of color correction, really basic. And we're never going to really get deep into this, but we're going to dip our toes into it so we can make things look a little bit better. So this is an interview that's not unlike what you guys are trying to do. And I just want to remind us that what we're trying to do is improve everything about this person who's speaking. So we want to make all the edits that we possibly can. And I showed this one in class the other day. Right here at the end of this line, just a little bit of a noise that I need to edit out. Let's hear that real quick. And it's my job to clean this up and make this person sound as good as possible. And you're going to find if you get into these edit points and you grab and click with the mouse and you can pull left and right, you're going to find that you can really do a lot and actually sandwich words together. And if you listen carefully, you're going to hear the person you're interviewing is probably repeating themselves a lot and giving you a chance to cut something out and make it a little bit smoother. So that's the first thing. It's our job to make it sound like this person delivered this speech scripted, practiced, rehearsed as best we can. That means all the ums, uhs, ah. We try to cut every one of those out that we can. And that's where we get our B-roll to come in. And our B-roll will allow us to cover some of these more jarring edits. So I could even go into this area here and I could tighten that up a little bit more. Now, if you were paying careful attention there, let me make this a little bit bigger. These are always a little unwieldy for me. If you're paying careful attention, you saw that my B-roll actually jumped out of the way. So I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to select all of these clips that are in the B-roll by shift clicking, or clicking on the first one and shift clicking on the last one. And then from the control click menu, I can choose create storyline, or I can hit Command G. Okay, now you'll see that all these clips live in this black box, and now the clips up here on the B-roll layer, the secondary storyline, now those are going to behave a lot more like the clips that are in the primary storyline. As it turns out, if I want to edit clips into here, I can do it just the same way that I did down here in the regular timeline. So that's something to note. So here we are, we're tightening this up, and now we're going to do something called checkerboarding. I'm going to select these three clips, click, and then shift click. And then again from the right click menu, you can choose expand audio or Control S. Control S is one that I like to remember. Now you see the audio is separate from the video as far as the edit points are concerned. Now we can edit audio and video separately. Well, why would we want to do that? Well, coming out of this clip over here, if I hit Control S, I see that, oh, I've actually taken this audio and I've stretched it just a little bit. So instead of, and I faded it out by grabbing this fade handle right here. So instead of this kind of abrupt move from one clip to another, I can stretch that out underneath it there. Maybe not that far, maybe that far. You know, you can get a feel for it and then fade it out. And that's going to smooth it. It's a little smoke and mirrors. That's one reason to do it. Another reason to do it is because at each one of these little transitions, and I zoomed in a little too close, at each one of these little transitions, there's a possibility that one of these waveforms is going to be cut kind of right in the middle of a peak, for example. And if we do that, we're going to hear little tiny clicks, just a little, it's very subtle, but boy do I hear it. And I hear it a lot because we're at that phase where we don't know this. So if we're cutting audio, we need to be really careful about smoothing that audio when we cut it. So here's all of these edits that we've done, And actually, if you zoom in really close on mine, you can see that each one of them have this tiny fade here. This one doesn't, but that's because I've been messing with it here. Each one of them has this tiny fade. That's because I want to smooth that edit point. We're going to do it a slightly different way. Click on that edit point, get to where you see just the one selected edit point, just that one bracket. Once we have that one edit point selected, and make sure again that you just have that one edit point selected, and it looks different if I have this one selected, and if I accidentally had a different tool, I could possibly select both of them. So be careful that you have one selected, and then look at the comma and period keys down by the letter M, and you'll see they are also greater than or less than signs, arrows basically. And I can take those arrows and I can tap them, and that's going to bump that edit a frame at a time. I could do the same here and bump that edit a frame at a time. And giving them just a frame or two of overlap is really going to smooth that out, and it's going to take it from here to here, and it's going to be subtle. It's going to be one of those things people are like, man, your audio sounds good. Okay, that's because I've gone and I've smoothed it, and I've made sure that there aren't any jarring cuts, and I made sure that there's a little bit of that connected tone from one to the next. And later we'll talk about recording room tone, but that is a different issue. So now I've gone through each of those, bumped them a frame so that they overlap, and now you can hopefully see why this is called checkerboarding. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these fade handles and pull them over just a little bit, and that's kind of entry-level checkerboarding and making sure that that audio is smooth. Whoops, missed the fade handle. There we go. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to do just some basic what's called color correction. And by the way, you'll see my window is I've turned off the browser because I'm done with the browser right now, and I just want to see my project. And I've actually taken to memorizing that shortcut actually really recently. I haven't always known Control Command 1, but it makes sense because the browser is where you start, number one, and so that gets me at least 33% of the way there. So that's something that you may have noticed. Another option here when we have these workspaces is we can choose this option called Color and Effects. And whoa, okay, that is crazy. What's going on? Well, we're going to talk about it in just a second. I'm going to leave it like that, even though that is a little bit overwhelming, and we'll go back and change it in just a second. I'm going to take any one of your B-roll clips and just kind of keeping an eye for a clip that you might be able to enhance a little bit to make it have a little bit more quality appearance. Let's put it that way. I could go into the modify menu. I could choose balance color if it's looking a little yellowish or a little orangish because maybe the white balance of the camera wasn't set quite right. And again, we haven't talked about that just yet, and that's okay. We're still on auto white balance, and we're good with that. Now what I want to do with this one is I want to get a little bit more creative, and I want to do something called color correction. And under this inspector over here, color correction is so important, it's got its own tab on every clip. And when we click on that color correction, we're presented with these wheels. What do they mean? Well, again, we're just going to do something real quick here. I'm going to change the view of this to just a single box, and I'm going to change the thing that I'm looking at. Well, you know what? I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it at that RGB parade, it's called. And some things I want to note. What I'm seeing here are representing the red, the green, the blue pixels, and the bright pixels. So here's some bright pixels that kind of fall under this blue color, and they're up here across the top. You can see the brightest pixels are up here, and then the darkest pixels are on this half of the image down here. And so you kind of see those dark pixels kind of represented down here, some dark reds and so forth. So that's kind of what we're looking at in a nutshell. This represents the video and the red pixels, and that's duplicated as we work our way through. Well, what we need to see is we need to see the darkest pixels getting closer to dark, and we need to make sure that the brightest pixels don't go above 100. We're going to do that by taking the shadows, and this little line here is the exposure line for the shadows, or the brightness level for the shadows. So I'm going to take the shadows and I'm going to pull that little control down, and as I do that I see those shadows, those dark colors coming down a little bit. And it's not a bad idea to push them just a little bit below. So some of them are a little bit below the 0 line. So now I've taken the shadows and I've brought them down. I still have some of these highlights that are above 100. I'm going to click on that one. I'm going to pull that down just a little bit. And then maybe I'm going to balance out the midtones a little bit because they got pulled down a little bit. And I'm going to pull those up to get maybe a few more balance out in the middle. And then that'll cause me to have to sort of rebalance by bringing down the shadows again. So again, we're taking this beautiful picture of a mountain. It looks fine the way it did, but we're wanting to kind of make it a little bit more impactful. In fact, let me show you what we have to overcompensate for our cameras. Let me show you what the camera looks like on this one. When we come out of the camera, this particular interview shot looks like this. Brace yourself for how bad this looks coming out of our very expensive camera. Okay, actually there's a few effects that are on there. So it looks like that when it comes out of the camera. So I put a little bit of this on there and a little bit of a color correction on there, and now that's the way it looks. So out of the camera, enhanced like that. So I think hopefully we can understand that we're needing to be able to at least know that this is something that we need to do. Let me get back to that mountain picture. I lost it there. Last thing I want to do on this, and I'm sorry for that tangent, last thing I want to do is I want to take this slider on the left of master, and that is the saturation level. And saturation is the amount of color that's in this. And I can take this and I'm going to make it real ugly. I'm going to drag it all the way up. Okay, that looks a little comical. And I'm going to drag it down until I go, oh, I don't really notice it anymore. How about there? And I'm going to edge it up just a little bit just because I want a little bit more pop. So let's look at before and after. This is our color correction. That's before. That's after. Color correction and audio enhancing. This is why when students are like, oh, Mr. Harrell, I'm done with my work. I'm like, well, you're done with doing the things you know how to do. So let's see if we can't dig a little deeper, and when we are done with our work, think, what could I do next? What could I learn? Maybe I could come over here and I could learn how to make my own custom title like this custom image reveal, that kind of thing. Well, that's what I'm talking about today. Let's get back to our regular workspace, Command 0, back to default, and now we're ready to kind of clean this up and get it published looking even better than it could have looked before.